Kia ora koutou, my name is Kate Barbie. I work for Fertility New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's webinar, Resilience in Fertility with Andy Leggat. For those of you who are not familiar with Fertility New Zealand, we're a registered charity organisation, and we walk alongside all people facing fertility challenges. We have a dedicated helpline, and we provide support, information and guidance to anyone at any stage of their journey. We publish the Dandelion newsletter 3 times a year, and copies are available at all clinics, and it can be downloaded from our website. We encourage you to become a member. Membership is free. It gives you free access to our online forum, and by joining Fertility New Zealand, you support the valuable work we do for New Zealanders experiencing fertility issues. Check out our website for more information. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speaker, Andy Leggat, Health Psychologist and Counsellor from Fertility Associates Auckland. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into the chat box, and Andy will respond to questions at the end of the presentation, including comments from Facebook Live. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks for that introduction, Kate, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking to you guys tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in late in the evening. Look, I still feel relatively new to the world of fertility in many ways. I've been working in this space for about coming up 4 years now, and I work with some incredible counsellors across the country and within Auckland who I learn so much from every day and have done for the past 4 years. I sometimes get a bit of imposter syndrome speaking at these events, but look, I hope there'll be some helpful content for those of you who are listening tonight, and as I say, it's a real pleasure to be speaking, and I'm always very happy to speak on the topic of resilience. Certainly is a hot topic, and I think we've all heard that word resilience spoken more in the past 2 years than ever before. So what does it actually mean, resilience, other than being a bit of a buzzword, of course? Well, if you Google the definition, this is what you might find. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. Okay, I think we could probably build on that. I quite like number 2 here. The ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, or elasticity. When I read this definition, I got this mental visualization of a jelly-like person who encountered some bumps and thumps and crashed over a few hurdles and then could morph back into their own shape. And that seemed quite appropriate to me when I thought about how this relates to some of the challenges people face through fertility treatment or infertility, taking medication, injections, undergoing multiple medical procedures, enduring losses, and trying to find your way back to your own shape somehow. Some of the other words that might pop up in relation to resilience are flexibility, plasticity, elasticity. And these might be generally perceived as somewhat positive words if we related them to human nature, some things that we might aim to be, in fact. But it's interesting that in tough times, when we're under pressure or stress or feeling more vulnerable than usual, it's actually very common to tend towards the opposite, to feel less flexible and more structured, more planned, looking for the constants and the stability in our world, the things that give us the sense of safety and normality and, of course, control. Now, for many of us, we've felt this vulnerability and heightened stress significantly over the past 2 years in relation to our lives being altered as a result of the arrival of COVID-19 and our lockdowns. And while COVID has been doing its thing, those of you out there have also been navigating a fertility journey in various shapes. So it seems like an appropriate time to talk about resilience and to consider some things that might help you or even build your resilience going forward. So this evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about what resilience is and what it isn't. I'll talk about how this relates to COVID-19, only a little, because I think it's hard to ignore what's happening in the wider world. And I'm also aware of the specific challenges that have been faced by people experiencing infertility through a time of COVID as well. I'll speak, of course, on resilience and infertility specifically. We know that infertility challenges resilience in unique ways, being that it touches so many areas of your lives. And then some considerations for perhaps maintaining or building resilience through infertility and fertility treatment. And being that we're headed quickly into the holiday season, December 1st today, I'll raise a few thoughts on thriving through the festive season also. And I believe that there is some time at the end for questions, so feel free to send them through as you think of them, and then I will tackle them at the end, or I'll at least give it a good go. So you're welcome to send those through anytime you like. And I'm going to do my very best to navigate the technology with Kate's very helpful support in the background. Bear with me if I totally botch this. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the American Psychological Association uses quite a nice metaphor for describing resilience, and I'm borrowing this from them. And this picture is a part of the Fertility River in Chile. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but this particular part of the river is called the Terminator, which sounds quite terrifying to me, actually. And what I want you to do now is I want you to imagine that you're taking a raft trip down the river. And along with the slow water and the shallows, your map shows you that you'll encounter some unavoidable rapids and some turns and sharp rocks. How would you make sure that you can safely cross the rough waters and handle the unexpected problems that come from the challenge? Perhaps you'd enlist the support of a more experienced rafter as you plan your route, or rely on the companionship of trusted friends along the way. Maybe you'd pack an extra life jacket or consider using a stronger raft, perhaps. Now, you might hit some bumps along the way. You might come out bruised at the end and fatigued from the journey. But with the right tools and supports in place, ideally, you'll not only make it through the challenge of your river adventure, you might also emerge a more confident and courageous rafter. And this, in fact, is resilience. Now, life doesn't come with a map, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, but everyone will experience the twists and the turns, from everyday challenges to traumatic events with more long-lasting impact. Things like the death of a loved one, or a life-altering accident, serious illness, infertility. And each affects people differently, bringing a unique flood of thoughts and strong emotions, and sometimes lots of uncertainty. Yet people generally adapt well over time to life-changing situations and stressful situations. We're often really robust, in part thanks to resilience. Now, psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threat, or significant source of stress. And as much as resilience involves bouncing back, if you think about that jelly-like person that we mentioned earlier, it can also involve profound personal growth. So let's talk a little bit about what resilience is and also what it isn't. Now, resilience doesn't mean not experiencing distress or difficulty. And what I mean by that is when you're faced with a clearly distressing situation, hypothetically, this could be finding out through your medical team that you have a significantly low ovarian reserve from an AMH test. Feeling distressed and upset by this is not an indication that you're not a resilient person. It's simply an appropriate and valid reaction to tough news. People who have suffered major adversity or trauma in their lives commonly experience emotional pain and stress. In fact, the road to resilience is likely to involve considerable emotional distress. And I know that there are those people out there that we know, and you think, gosh, it seems like everything has gone so well for them and things have come so easily. It sometimes looks like that on the outside. And of course, everyone's path is different and we experience different levels of hardship. But most people will encounter struggles and challenges in their lives in some capacity. Now, while certain factors might make some individuals more resilient than others, and I'm going to talk about that a little later on, resilience isn't a personality trait that only some people possess. And this is really important. This is a take home. We're not born with our allotted amount of resilience for our lifetime. On the contrary, resilience involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that anyone can learn and develop over time. And in fact, you'll likely notice that your personal levels of resilience fluctuate through your lifetime. If we think about it like building a muscle, yeah? So increasing your resilience takes time and certainly intentionality. And sometimes this involves self-reflection, taking time to stop and consider, how am I doing right now? What do I need? And for some people, the recent lockdowns have actually provided that opportunity. And lots of us have been forced to slow life down a little bit. Maybe some of you are working from home, not have the same full social calendar that we might normally have. And this has meant more time and more mental space to ask those questions. How am I doing? What do I need right now? Resilience is not a quality that you either do or do not possess. Still, there are specific characteristics that highly resilient people tend to share. So I'm going to talk about some of those now. I will endeavour to. Here we go. Okay, now I want to premise this by saying, if you feel that you don't possess the following characteristics, it's not an indication that you can't be resilient or you can't build resilience. I don't want you to start catastrophizing that you can't possibly be resilient because you don't tend to be an optimistic person. Like we talked about, anyone can build their resilience muscles. These are simply traits that have been commonly seen in highly resilient people, or people high in resilience, I should say. Okay, so the first one is emotional awareness. So what we know is that people with high emotional awareness tend to have a strong understanding of what they're feeling and why, to recognize those emotions and maybe where they've come from. They may also understand the feelings of others because they're more in touch with their own. And this type of emotional understanding allows people to respond appropriately to others and sometimes to better regulate and cope with those challenging emotions that come up. And the next one is perseverance, people high in perseverance. So these are people who are often really action-oriented, working towards goals, more likely to keep working towards a goal when they're faced with an obstacle, we might say. And then we've got internal locus of control. So this is an interesting one. So these are people that believe that rather than outside forces, they are more in control of their lives. This trait is associated with lower stress levels, I should say, and people with an internal locus of control tend to have a realistic view of the world and may be more proactive in dealing with stresses in their lives, are more solution-oriented and feel a greater sense of control, which helps combat perceived stress. And I think that's an interesting one when it comes to infertility, which is often perceived as something that we feel we have very little control over, personal control. And then we have optimism. Now, this is related to being able to see both the positives as well as the negatives in a situation, and to believe in the possibility of a positive outcome. And I think that statement is really important here, the possibility of a positive outcome. I work with lots of people through my practice, and some will present with high levels of optimism and will say, oh, I need to remain super positive throughout this journey. Although I think that sometimes comes at the detriment of not allowing themselves to grieve the losses along the way. And then I see people who are more glass half empty, we might say, who are maybe going to assume the worst. So if I get a negative outcome, the fall doesn't seem so high. And again, I think this mentally comes with its own challenges, and that you might miss out on the hope that keeps you afloat through a fertility journey. So approaching a situation with an open, realistic mind, with the possibility of a positive outcome, allows for the whole raft of emotions on the roller coaster. So the next one there is support. And social support plays a critical role in fostering resilience, in addition to, I think, improving overall mental well-being in some cases. While resilient people are often strong individuals, they're often also, they know the value of social support and can surround themselves with supportive friends and family. And I'm going to speak a bit more about that later on. And I quite like this next one. So a sense of humour. People strong in emotional resilience, apparently, are more likely to be able to laugh at life's difficulties. I think sometimes that's easier said than done. But this can help shift our perspective from seeing things as a threat to seeing them as a challenge. It's quite a subtle difference there. So quite a distinct difference, and a subtle difference, I should say, and this alters how our body reacts to stress. And having a solid laugh actually has some added health benefits as well. And then we have perspective. So resilient people can learn from their mistakes, see obstacles as challenges, and allow adversity to make us stronger. They're also more likely to find meaning in life's challenges. And then the last one is around spirituality. And this is thinking about spirituality in a broad sense, not religiosity. Being connected to your spiritual side has been linked with stronger emotional resilience. Where am I? Find the right slide. Okay. So I noted earlier that the past 2 years and the arrival of COVID-19 to our world has both challenged our resilience and provided an opportunity to build that muscle of ours. People have been impacted by COVID in many, many ways, and some more than others. Globally, what we've seen is populations sitting with significant uncertainty, a loss in the predictability that we have about the way that the world works, and for some challenged our belief that the world is a safe place to be. And as humans, we like predictability and routine. Our brains learn from routine, and this in turn helps us to prepare and problem solve. So when the world shifts significantly under our feet, and very quickly as it has done with COVID-19, we often feel wobbly on those foundations, and there simply is just a greater level of distress to manage on top of the other events going on in our lives. An emotion that's been talked about a lot in relation to this is grief. And we often think about grief being something we feel when we lose something or lose someone, the loss of a loved one, a pregnancy loss. And we've seen this grief globally in relation to the impact of COVID-19. A grief about a loss of certainty, and for some, a loss of a sense of control of our world. I feel like I've got you guys on the wrong slide here. Bear with me. There we go. Sorry, apologies. And what we've also got is anticipatory grief. And so this is around the future. And so while we learn more about the various level changes and traffic light systems, which I'm still very much getting my head around, it's hard to predict what the future looks like next week, let alone what it looks like a year from now. And the response to that is often grief. Now, for those of you who have also been on a fertility journey throughout this time, you've had to navigate even greater challenges. And there's some excellent research, actually, that's been conducted internationally and within an arm within New Zealand, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on patients undergoing fertility treatment in particular. And some of those results indicating very clearly higher distress levels, increased anxiety, increased depression, and perceived stress. And I'm very aware that people have struggled with treatments being delayed at times, certainly in that first lockdown that we had about 18 months ago. Fears of coming into a medical setting with other people when we're told to stay away from others or assume that they have COVID. Keeping your physical distance is hard when you come into a clinic setting. Needing to have COVID tests prior to appointments, that certainly gets your blood pressure up. Not being able to have support people in the clinics, or receiving potentially negative outcomes at a time when it's harder to connect with your support team and those who are really important to you. So again, our resilience has really been challenged here. Okay, now I've got you on the right slide. Of course, COVID-19 aside, I recognise that experiencing infertility presents us with a test to our resilience on its own. There are very few stresses in our lives that would impact us on so many dimensions of our world, and infertility provides a physical impact, with many undergoing various treatments, medications, tests. Of course, an emotional impact and riding that cyclical roller coaster and the many losses that are common with people's journeys. For some, a spiritual stressor and a challenge to your wider thinking about what fertility means. And a financial stressor through treatment, of course, and a social stressor, how we relate to those around us, our family and our friends, and living in a world that places value on family and creating family. And I think, that's portrayed so often. And perhaps the reason that infertility is so all-encompassing is a great deal of research has focused in the past on the role that resilience has played in people experiencing infertility. So, where am I? If we go to this next slide here. We've spoken about infertility and fertility treatment feeling like a bit more of a marathon than a sprint. So it's important to consider the long-term impacts of this marathon, I guess. A number of research studies over the past decade have looked at the interplay between resilience and fertility-related quality of life through various measures that have been developed, the FERQUAL being one of them. And results have consistently indicated that resilience acts as a protective factor and a moderator against factors that negatively impact quality of life for infertility patients, people undergoing fertility treatment. So those individuals who illustrated high resilience reported less impact from fertility stress and high fertility-related quality of life as measured by the FERQUAL. And I think what we can take from this is resilience acts as a coping resource and can effectively combat psychological stress at times, or to a degree, and that adequate resilience-based interventions or strategies that people may learn over time are likely to be beneficial for experiencing infertility. Now, this next slide, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on it, even though lovely Kate redid it for me because I botched it up a little bit. But you may be considering, how do I actually know if my resilience is low? How would I check in with myself? And this is a tough one because I think that will present in different ways in different people. But some of the things that I've listed off here that you may recognize in yourself may be a change in levels of irritability or anger or other various emotions, noticing that you're less tolerant of the smaller things than you may be or have been previously. There is some evidence to suggest that people low in resilience may be more susceptible to things like the common cold, so they may have experienced persistent illness. Changes in your sleeping habits, difficulty getting off to sleep or waking throughout the night. Again, there's lots of reasons that you might also experience that. Isolation, so pulling away from people who are important to you. Strong reactions to normal stress, I talked about that earlier. Poor memory, so changes to short-term memory can be an indication of being low in resilience. And lack of hope. And I'll talk a bit more about that one later on as well. So maybe more importantly, where I want to focus some attention, let's focus on some tools that might aid in maintaining or building resilience in the future. Now this one is the smorgasbord slide, so it's a little overwhelming, I realise, bear with me. And some of these things you may already be doing, and if so, give yourself a big pat on the back. And other things you might like to pick up gently and have a go with. Remember that fostering resilience is very much a personal journey. It's going to be different for everyone. It's about trying new things, different things, and when it's not working, re-evaluating, making a change, trying something new. Resilience is often about adaptation, that flexibility that we spoke about in the definition. So the first one I've got listed here is about developing a fertility mindset. And what I mean by this is not always easy to do, but letting go of the image of what you wish your fertility could be. And I think, I often talk to people about how we develop these expectations from a very young age. Even, you see children playing in a playground and they play in families, and they will often model this off their own families. So we have this idea, and although as individuals we recognize that our lives might deviate from our expectations, but when our fertility journey doesn't mimic the expectations that we've had throughout our whole life or what we've seen, witnessed in other family members, it's really hard to let go of that image. So your fertility mindset is about having something that's built on facts, evidence, knowledge, and acceptance of your personal experience. So it's about embracing things as they are, taking steps to plan for your journey ahead, which hopefully allows you to be grounded in reality. It also helps you to avoid comparing yourself to others, which I know is really easy to do when it seems like you're surrounded by people announcing pregnancies after they've been trying for 1 month. Your story is unique. It may not be what you imagined it would be, but each day brings an opportunity to accept what it is and take action towards your goals. The next one up there is about measuring success. So I want you to think about the idea that everything that you're doing is working towards your goal. So it's about measuring success by the step forwards, not necessarily the outcomes. And during fertility treatment, when a positive pregnancy result is not achieved, many of us tend to paint everything with a feeling of failure, including ourselves sometimes. And it's important to think about what you see as a success during this time, and maybe actually trying a new treatment or exploring the timing of intercourse. Perhaps you've started using something like acupuncture or changing lifestyle factors, which may not have obvious or measurable outcomes, but everything that you're doing, you're trying a step forward, and that should be your definition of success and what makes you see yourself as successful. So catching those little micro moments of success can give you a much needed lift to sustain those efforts going forward. And along with this, I think this goes hand in hand, celebrating the small wins along the way. And every step can be a win in some ways. So if you've been trying to conceive for some time, you might find that your brain has started to focus on all the things that are not going well. And this negativity bias that many of us have works to filter out all the alternative information. And the result can be feeling really helpless or sometimes hopeless. And I often talk to my patients about how they can build a guard over time. So early on in the journey, that guard wall, that protective wall that you have might be really low and really flexible. But after we've experienced losses, we're really quick to build that up, this thick wall, high protective barrier, the more negative results we get. And although it might work as a protective barrier at times, it sometimes also keeps the opportunities for seeing smaller successes out and the joy that we get from those smaller successes. All right, so I mentioned this one earlier, but planning for a marathon, not a sprint, and it is a bit of a journey for most people. And they call it a journey for a reason. So making sure that you've got enough left in your tank to get you across the line. We think about pace and speed of your effort. So consider whether all of the appointments, the tasks, the hobbies, the social commitments that you have can be maintained over the long term. And remember, a successful marathon is about a sustained effort. Doing too much too quickly or too often can sometimes deplete your energy and leave you feeling like there's not much left in the tank at the end. And this is where it's helpful to just give yourself a break. So this is my next one. It's a bit of a controversial one, I guess. When you're on the fertility clock, taking a break can feel like a very counterintuitive, and the awareness of your fertility window is very real, I realize. But just like time away from work or time away from conceiving can have several positive benefits. So your body and your mind work really closely together consistently, and giving both the opportunity to rest and recharge is actually an act of kindness, of self-compassion. So remember that a break doesn't have to be an extended period of time. It might be a day, it might be a weekend, or it might be a month, where you actively dedicate time to doing things that are unrelated to getting pregnant. And whatever it is that you do, it's about giving your mind and body a break from the activities of trying to conceive. Often when I talk to people about what this break might feel like for them, I suggest that they might not be 100% able to shift their fertility-related thinking to the side. It's always kind of hovering in the background and sometimes sneaking up to the forefront. But being able to recognize this thinking and again, gently putting it down, knowing that you have permission to focus on other things during your break, and you can pick that back up again when you feel ready to do so. Okay, then we've got making room for emotions. Now, not all of us are experts at talking about our emotions. Even the experts aren't great at it sometimes. And when our emotions feel intense and complex, it can feel even more confronting to bring them up. When it comes to talking about complex human emotions, such as shame or despair, worthiness, Reaching out and opening up can make us feel really vulnerable. However, withholding our feelings and emotions can make it sometimes feel like a bit of a pressure cooker. Eventually, the valve needs to be released. So being able to confide in a close family member, maybe keeping a journal, talking to a best friend, or engaging with the help of a professional, talking to Fertility New Zealand and their amazing support groups on a regular basis, can create ways to let off that steam, that pressure cooker. Expressing your feelings can help you know yourself more deeply, and this in turn can lead to greater insight and self-awareness sometimes. And this goes hand in hand, but surrounding yourself with a support network. Human beings are hardwired for connection, and it's one of the reasons so many of us have struggled throughout the lockdowns with an inability to connect with others outside of this screen, of course. Forming strong ties with family, friends, colleagues, neighbours, our community is really important, if not essential at times, for our mental and physical health. And during your fertility treatment, you may find that some connections serve you better than others, and that's okay. And taking a step back from some relationships that are not serving you is also all right to do. Don't be afraid to set boundaries with people. Give them a heads up about what you need and what you don't need, what it's okay to talk about. I think you'll find that they often appreciate it. Invest in life outside of fertility. I think this is a really important one. We spoke earlier about how infertility touches lots of different areas of your world, and that's perhaps why we hear so often about people living life in limbo, finding it hard to move forward in those other areas. So while you're trying to conceive, it's sometimes hard to move forward in the other key areas. For instance, you may stay in a job that you don't really love as such. It's okay, but you don't love it because ideally you're hoping to be pregnant soon. You don't want to start a new role when you're pregnant, or don't want to jeopardize your maternity leave, which is absolutely fair enough. You may be putting off traveling or buying a house in case you need the funds for fertility treatment. And although it may feel like you just want to focus your attention on getting pregnant, it's these other rich things in our lives, the things that bring us joy and pleasure, that actually prop us up. They provide the fuel for the marathon versus sprint analogy. And actively pursuing other life goals and making positive movements forward brings opportunities to fill up our emotional tank. So while also creating opportunities to feel a sense of achievement, mastery, accomplishment in those other areas or domains of our life. And avoiding the temptation to put everything on hold until you achieve pregnancy, and consider what you can do in the here and now. Self-compassion and kindness. So in the absence of answers and explanations about why things aren't working, why you haven't had a successful pregnancy, we start to look for answers ourselves. Sometimes this leads to people looking inwards. Self-blame. Did I do something wrong? Should I have done something differently? If only I had. And not only does this not provide us with the answers that we're looking for, it also impacts the way that we feel about ourselves. Consider what it would be like to speak to yourself with kindness. Tell your body what an amazing job it's doing each month. Congratulate yourself for getting through a tough time. Consider the acts of kindness you could give to yourself, even the small things like taking a walk in a pleasant place, mindfully enjoying your favourite food. Take care of yourself in the same way that you would look after another person who you love and care about. And finally, mindfulness. What psychology webinar would be complete without a word on mindfulness? Now, mindfulness can have a webinar all to itself. I'm only going to speak on this very briefly. A great deal of our thinking is often based in the past, dwelling or considering events that have already happened, things that we can't change, or alternatively in the future, the unknowns, planning, preparing, trying to be 10 steps ahead of ourselves. And this is often us trying to maintain a sense of control over our world, prepare for what's coming next, which can be helpful at times. But what it means is that very little of our attention is actually in the present moment, in the here and now. Mindfulness is about intentionally bringing your attention to the present moment without judgment, simply noticing, allowing yourself to be. The present moment being a place that we can be grounded, and this can bring a sense of calm, sometimes safety and quiet. Doesn't that sound nice? There's lots and lots of evidence out there about the health benefits of engaging in regular mindfulness practice, and even within a fertility context. And I would encourage you to look into options for learning more about mindfulness if it's something you're interested in, and I'd be happy to provide any resources. Okay, cool. That was a big slide, guys. Well done getting through that. All right. 'Tis the season. Whilst Christmas and the holidays are often full of lots of fun and spending time with the people we love, this can also be a really daunting gauntlet to navigate for people who are trying to conceive for lots of reasons. One is that it simply marks another rotation around the sun, which for some people will mean a time of reflection of the year just been, reflecting that they hope to be pregnant by now or hope to have their baby by now. For many, it will mean thinking about the losses that have happened in the past 12 months preceding. On top of that, you're also managing the invites to social events, perhaps less in COVID times maybe, being bombarded with images of families and babies in Santa hats, because again, we live in a world that places value on family, and especially at Christmas time. And of course, the well-meaning questions from extended relatives about how your fertility journey is going and when are you guys having kids or when are you having the next kid. It's very tempting sometimes to put your head in the sand until about mid-January, and this can come with its own challenges. So there might be some things that you could do to help yourself through this time. So let's consider some of those. All right. So firstly, it's sometimes helpful to prepare in advance for this. If you're in a relationship, talk to your partner about how you want to navigate this time of year and mutually agree on how much you're sharing and with whom. Remember that your fertility story is yours and you have permission to share as much information as you feel comfortable with. You may also prepare a stock standard statement for people who ask the uncomfortable question. How's your fertility going? When are you having kids? And your statement could be one that politely says, I don't want to talk about that here. And although I can't put words in your mouth, and it's best that you come up with a statement that feels right for you, it might be something along the lines of, we hope to start a family in the future, and gently shift the conversation to a more comfortable space. It's okay to say no to events too. There are lots of Christmas parties and catch-ups being planned, particularly now that we're, in theory, able to get together in some capacity outside of Zoom meetings. And it's okay to pick and choose the ones that feel doable and to decline some of the ones that might feel too confronting right now. A young woman that I've worked with previously had a code word between she and her partner. And if they were in an event and one of them wanted to head out because the baby chat had just got too much, they could use their code word and they knew that it was time to leave. I just love that. Of course, there might be key people in your world who you do want to open up to, and I'm highly encouraging of this. Infertility can be incredibly isolating. Sitting with intense emotions at this time of the year can feel really weighty. So have a think about your friends and your family and who you might feel safe sharing with. Give these people a heads up that actually you might be struggling at this time of year. It's amazing to have people in your corner who have your back at the Christmas events or just checking in with you from time to time. And like I said earlier, it's very tempting just to put your head in the sand and pop up in mid-Jan, but actually being around people that you enjoy the company of has lots of health benefits. Now, you might treat yourself, a bit of self-love here. And there are lots of occasions that are very family or child-oriented at this time of year. But you can choose some pampering sessions that are all about you, or all about you and your partner, perhaps. It might be a day trip somewhere that you've always wanted to go, escaping the city to somewhere remote and beautiful, planning a nice meal, or very simply some self-compassion. Once again, checking in with what your needs are, and if there are a few even small changes you can make to your day to care for yourself. And of course, making room for your emotions again. Now, Christmas is a really emotional time. and all the emotions you feel: happiness, joy, sadness, grief, anger, frustration. They're all your emotions, and they are all valid. And just because it's Christmas doesn't mean you have to be the happiest little Christmas elf on the planet. It's okay to recognize the other emotions too, the ones that are just as real, and they don't always feel that pleasant. Sometimes by making room for them, sitting with them, tolerating them, knowing that it's okay that they're there, helps us move through them with greater ease than when we try and bury them or pretend that they're not really there or shouldn't be there at this time of year. And finally, participate in activities that bring meaning for you. Christmas is a time of reflection, and it may be that you're still on your fertility journey, and perhaps next Christmas may look very different. But in the meantime, what's meaningful in your life now? What are some things that you can do that are in line with your values, the things that are important to you, the things that are helping you move towards those goals you have outside of fertility, the things that you choose to engage in? So, in conclusion, I want you to remember that resilience is not a concrete trait, but rather a muscle that can be strengthened over time. And that strength often comes from navigating the rapids and the white water when we're in our rafts. And that's the lessons that we learn and the gems of knowledge that we pick up about ourselves and learning how we react in the face of adversity. And it's likely there will be times when your resilience bucket feels like it's running on empty. And I know how that feels. It's okay to stop sometimes and consider those questions. How am I doing? What do I need right now? And when what you're doing doesn't seem to be working for you, try something new. Remember that there's lots of support out there to be had. Reaching out to friends, family, professionals, amazing organisations like Fertility New Zealand can feel like bringing someone else along with you on your life raft. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about resilience tonight, and maybe there's some things that you can take away and put into action or just sit and think about. Thank you so much for listening. And I will, if you've got any questions, I can maybe have a go at answering them. Thanks, guys. Switch over to the screen for a moment. Bear with me while I change.
Thanks for that, Andy. Great presentation. Really enjoyed that. Great.
You are so welcome.
To come through.
Oh, thanks for your lovely messages, guys.
It's sorry, Andy, just feedback. I'll just put you on mute there for a second. It is a bit of a hard topic to, you might be stuck for questions at the moment. So I know that Andy is more than happy to answer anything at a later time. So if anybody does feel that they would, oh, we've got a few questions down there. Can you see those, Andy?
Yep, sorry, I'm turning my mic back on. Yes, yep, and Kate, I'm more than happy to, if people have questions that come following the talk tonight, happy to reach out and answer those. Can you get a copy of the slides? Yeah, I think that this has all been recorded and it's going to be put on the website. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, that's correct. So we'll do that. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so we'll do that, and Lucy, I can email those out to you as well. So that's not a problem. Sorry, Andy, just put yourself back on. Take your mute off.
Oh,
Thanks.
sorry about that, guys. Is there a list of counsellors that you can contact for support through Fertility New Zealand? That is a good question. I don't know if there is a like a master list of everyone through the various clinics, and if not, we could probably create one of those. Every fertility clinic in New Zealand has counsellors attached to them, NZCA registered counsellors, and who are all available for support. And so if we don't have a master list of how you could contact people, then we should create one. And then there's also incredible support, of course, through Fertility New Zealand and the support groups, regional groups and support series that run throughout the year is another really good option, and that's all on the Fertility New Zealand website as well. So this person has said, I'm generally a resilient person, but struggling with recurring loss. Any tips to get out of the feeling of stuck in a vortex of grief? And thank you so much for wonderful resonate. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Gosh, it's so challenging, isn't it? And grief is a really weighty emotion to experience. And I often think that fertility treatment, there's not always an obvious space to grieve. There's often this pressure of we just need to keep on going. What's the next plan? And for some people, having a plan going forward is really helpful in that it gives you a sense of control of, we're heading in the right direction. But in actual fact, it sometimes feels like that grief is mounting up on the outside and we don't always tackle all of it. So it feels like it just grows or sits there or jumps in, and we're triggered by things unpredictably. Things to think about might be, being able to open up to key people in your world, reaching out to a professional where you have a space to actually unravel some of those things, to debrief, to speak openly about them, knowing that that's a really safe place. And it can often feel really vulnerable by doing that, by unraveling that and leaving the pressure cooker off, so to speak. So knowing that you can do it in a safe space and that you can put it to the side very gently when you need to, when it's all feeling too overwhelming. But absolutely, I think I would really recommend speaking to someone about that. You find that women benefit more? Do you find that women benefit more from counselling than men? Ooh, short answer, no. I think we probably see more women coming through our counselling service than we would men. But if I looked at the benefits gained from across those genders, I don't know that one would benefit more than another. It would be potentially tackling different challenges. And I think there are specific challenges that would be more present for men and than for women going through treatment. But we see lots of men through our service, and I hope that they find it really beneficial too. Yeah. What's your key? What's your key advice for how to spend time around pregnant friends? It's really hard, isn't it? And what people will often talk about is when their friends are pregnant or move into a phase of their life when they have very young children, it sometimes it feels like everything revolves around them. And that is because their children are the centre of their universe, and they have had to adapt. Their life has adapted to become parents. And so all the chat is about babies and sleep schedules and poo schedules and various other things. And it's really easy to feel like you've been left out of the club, or you don't have any chat, or you can't relate, on top of feeling that it's really confronting because you're witnessing someone in front of you who's got everything that you've been trying so hard for so long. What I encourage is actually openness and honesty, and I know that's a really courageous thing to do, but a really terrifying thing to do. But there may be even key people within that pregnancy circle or pregnant friends where you're able to say, gosh, sometimes I find it really hard, and this is something I've struggled with. And it's not about expecting them to change their life necessarily, but just having a really healthy awareness of what that might be like for you. You may find that they're slightly more compassionate, or all of the chat isn't always related to the pregnancy side of things. Also, knowing that you can get some distance when you need to, and we talked about getting through the holiday season, picking and choosing the events that you go to, and when it feels like they're going to be way too baby related and that's just going to be too hard, actually being able to say no. Another piece of advice is organizing your own get together where it's not all about babies, or it's not full of people who have just announced pregnancies. Take some control over your social network and what you do and who you spend time with. Any tips on practicing acceptance of infertility without giving up hope? Yeah, hope is a big one, isn't it? And I think when I was talking about optimism earlier, one of those slides talked about how people who are more optimistic, or I should say people who are more resilient, often have traits of high optimism. And it's just so easy to build a wall up, to build a guard, to protect yourself when you've experienced those multiple losses and the marathon that is infertility. Being able to recognize or make room for a place of hope, going in with a realistic mindset of I want to remain hopeful here. I'm realistic. I understand the stats around this, or the possibilities and the lack of guarantee, but I want to allow a place for hope. And what does hope look like for me? Another event that I can't handle are baby showers. Oh, me neither. Baby showers and things. What advice can you offer for how to handle these? Baby showers are particularly confronting, aren't they? I guess the very nature of them, they're all about babies. First of all, you don't have to go if you don't want to. It is perfectly reasonable to say, do you know what, I'm not going to attend this today. I hope you have a wonderful day and it's incredible. I'm not going to be able to make it. Our really good friends actually understand that and go, that's perfectly reasonable. I absolutely get that. That's okay. Let's catch up another time. And it may be that, again, you take control over that and say, look, I can't make it on that day. Have a wonderful day. How about we catch up separately? I'd love to see you. And obviously another environment, something that isn't full of little plastic babies in classes and all of those things that are so fun when you're going through it, but when you're not, it's just really hard. I hope that's helpful and not too cynical. I think that's all of them. Oh no, excuse me, I've just missed one here. I'm doing our next transfer next week and really nervous about the timing around Christmas. Yeah, look, I think this is particularly difficult, and I really feel for people who are going through treatment and getting outcomes. So sitting with the anxiety, the 2-week wait around Christmas, when you're so desperately trying to move your attention elsewhere and use your best distraction strategies to focus on other things, and not so much about all of that, internal focus of what's going on, what is going to be the outcome, what would it be like if it's positive, what's going to be like if it's negative. And look, a negative outcome, no matter what time of the year, is always going to be really challenging. What I suggest you do is plan for what you need around that time. And it's not suggesting that you assume that it's going to be a negative, but gosh, if it was negative, what would be helpful for me? Who do I need around me? You might give someone a heads up, again, those key people in your world. Hey, look, I'm getting this news around this time. I might not be able to make it to those events, or actually I might need some support. Could we go somewhere? Could we get out of here? Could we go and do something else? What else have you got going on right now outside of the 2-week wait, or waiting for results, or going through treatment? So hard though, absolutely hard. Questions. Good questions your partner can ask to help you process your emotions, or how couples can support each other through the infertility journey. Oh, that's a big one. I think we could have a webinar just on that question, probably. Okay. So the first thing to recognize is couples, and I'm not talking about heterosexual couples here or same-sex couples, just couples, two individuals together going through infertility or fertility treatment. It's very likely that they're going to be coping in different ways as individuals. And so what you've got is parallel things going on. You've got people managing their own emotions and what it means to be going through this. And if we are talking about a heterosexual couple, the experience, like I mentioned earlier, for men can often feel really different for women, because men simply don't feel the symptoms of a pregnancy or a miscarriage or a transfer or an OPU or stapled injections, which can often lead to feelings of feeling really helpless or hopeless, or I don't know what my role here is, I'm struggling to know how to support you, struggling to know the right questions to ask. So we've got people trying to cope individually and then coping together as a couple and recognizing this is a major thing that we're going through as a couple in our life at this particular stage. We're learning so much about each other, we're our main support groups, there's a lot of pressure on that. But what does that support look like? How do we do it? And a big part of that is actually communication, being able to stop and go, I can see, or I know you so well, I know how you typically manage stress and in vulnerable situations. How are you managing this? And actually, this is how I'm doing. And this is what I would need for you. Being really honest about how you're going and what's helpful and what's unhelpful, and being able to say that in a really kind and compassionate way of, hey, babe, this is what would be really nice for me at the moment. I really struggled during this period. And if you could just ask me how I'm going, or be the listening ear and not give me advice or tell me that it's all going to be okay, but just to say I'm here to listen. So be really honest is my big thing there. Communicate what your needs are and recognize that they may be on a slightly different pathway, and that's perfectly reasonable. It's a lot about compromise. I got a bit off track there. Sorry, team. Any tips for dealing with stress around running out of time? Yes. So what I think you're referring to there is that overarching pressure of your fertility clock, of the biological clock, feeling like you can't get off the conveyor belt because there is a finite time to this. And gosh, isn't that pressure real? Again, very, very weighty. I think weighing up what that pressure feels like by actually being able to get some perspective and actually taking a step back and going, where am I at right now? What's the direction I'm going and what's important to me? Am I moving forward in those other areas of my life? When I spoke about being able to move forward, removing the life in limbo mentality and feeling like you're achieving in other areas. It can often, doesn't take away the pressure necessarily, but sometimes it helps to balance it out. Knowing what the next steps are, knowing what your options are, being able to lay them out in front of you and feel like you have a clear plan or a pathway. Having those really challenging conversations with your medical team, if it is that you're involved with a medical team, or those key people in your world if it's a partner. Not easy. So this person said, same as me, I'm having my transfer in December and we'll find out just before the outcome, just before Christmas Day, if not successful. How can I try to move on or be happy, especially during Christmas season around kids and family? So finding out that you're not pregnant, if you find out that it hasn't been successful the day before Christmas, that's going to bring up lots of intense emotions. And I don't expect that you should be 100% happy at that time. That's simply not reasonable. It is perfectly okay to take some time to grieve and be upset by that reaction. I realize it's really tempting to go, you know what, I'm just going to pack this so I can enjoy Christmas and be around the kids and be happy and have this wonderful day. And you can, that's certainly an option. it's a hard one. I think it's a really tiring one, putting on that big brave face and pretending like this hasn't happened. What I would suggest is allowing yourself space and privacy, or whether if it's with a partner, then being with your partner to actually make some room to sit with those emotions. What does this feel like for me? What does this mean? This is really hard. Actually, this is not the outcome that we wanted at all. And I want to be able to go and enjoy Christmas and enjoy being around the family. So let's balance that out. Can I get a bit of both in here, knowing that I'm going to need to bow out, and it may be that you let your family know that at times actually this just feels too much. It's just a really, really difficult time to get that news, isn't it? And I hope you get a positive outcome, actually. Okay. Ooh. Do you have any tips on how to deal with work parties? I've had one failed embryo transfer, and next week I'm going for my second embryo transfer. I haven't told anyone. I don't want to miss out on the work party, but don't want to be confronted with the "Are you pregnant?" question, because it won't be drinking. I know everyone goes to that, don't they? Choose how much you share into whom. Yeah, so that was the prepare idea of in advance, because when you're in the moment, it's really easy to get flustered, and someone walks up to you, they've had a couple of glasses of whatever, and like, hey, what's the story? How's that all going? Are you pregnant? Yeah, what's going on? Oh, you're not drinking. Are you pregnant? And you kind of panic in the moment and blurt something out that later on you feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't shared that actually. So prepare in advance, and even if you write your script out and have a little bit of a practice with it, it's very reasonable. Be clear about, this is your story, this is your information, it's no one else's, and it's okay to pick and choose how much you share into who. And so when someone asks the question, the inevitable question, you go, well, no, I'm living a healthy lifestyle, or I've chosen not to drink at the moment because I don't feel like it. Whatever reason fits well for you is perfectly reasonable. And I don't want people to miss out on fun activities and Christmas occasions because they're going through fertility treatment at the moment or waiting on pregnancy results. You are well entitled to be at these really wonderful events, and they don't have to be tailored to all of those yucky questions. I'm in the same boat of having my transfer this weekend. All the best for that. And finding out the result around Christmas, nerves are high. What strategies can you suggest to handle the anxiety and nerves around this phase? So during that time, what will happen for most people, and you've probably experienced this yourselves if you've already had transfers, is we become really internally focused, and it feels like time stands still. So, any given moment, we have thousands of what we might say symptoms, bodily functions going through our physical body, blood pumping, muscle contracting and releasing, pain twinges, but we don't pay attention to them, because if you did pay attention to them, you wouldn't function in your world. You'd be far too busy paying attention to what's going on in your body. However, when you are waiting on test results, whether it's a pregnancy outcome, whether you've had, you're waiting on diagnosis, what we do as a way to gain control or seek reassurance is to focus our attention inwards. What's going on in my body? What do I recognize? Is that an indication of a pregnancy? Is it an indication of not pregnant, of a period? And you search hard enough, you'll find answers, just not necessarily the right ones, but you will find symptoms. So the first thing I want you to think about is actually just recognizing that, being able to take a step back in a really mindful manner, being really present in the moment of, gosh, where is my attention right now? I think where it is I'm really focused on what's going on in my body, and is that okay? And you might even label that, this is my anxious thinking, or this is my pregnancy thinking. You label it whatever feels appropriate for you. And then the third thing is, what do I want to do with this? Is it okay that I'm sitting with this anxiety right now and my attention's gone to my cramps or my whatever's going on? Or do I want to shift my attention elsewhere? Are there other things going on for me over the next week or even in the moment that I would like to take my attention to? And maybe there are, or maybe you go, no, right now I really want to focus on my anxiety and whether I'm pregnant or not. And that's okay too. But again, balancing it out. And you are in control of where you take your attention. But I spoke earlier about making room for emotions and that being okay. So being able to make room for my anxiety. And you know what? It's really reasonable that you're anxious right now. That's a perfectly acceptable human response to waiting for a pregnancy outcome. So notice it, label it, own it. And then what do I want to do with this? Do I want to shift it? Or do I want to sit with this, knowing that it's not going to hurt you? It just doesn't feel very pleasant. And remembering that it's temporary. And I know that it feels like it's the longest 2 weeks ever. But it is temporary. One way or another, it will come to an end and you will have an answer. Hope that's helpful.
Hi, Andy. I think we're at the end now. Sorry, there's just a bit of feedback on Andy's computer there. I really want to thank you for tonight. Great questions as well. So thank you so much for your time. We have run over a little bit. We've taken over an extra 5 minutes of your evening tonight. So we really appreciate your time. So thank you very much. This is our last webinar for 2021. We wish everyone a safe and Merry Christmas and good night. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Andy. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good night.